These are immortal monuments of heroism, built with bones and adorned with the blood of great warriors. They are an endless source of inspiration for courage, sacrifice, and indomitable spirit. Yes, we are talking about the greatest last stand battles in human history. 1. The Great Siege of Malta, 1565. If the Ottomans win this battle, no one knows what calamity will fall upon the Christian world. Those were the words of Queen Elizabeth I of England when speaking about the battle that would determine the fate of all Europe, the Great Siege of Malta in 1565. After capturing Constantinople and burying the Byzantine Empire in 1453, the Ottoman Empire officially became a global superpower and a great threat to Christendom. However, to advance into Western Europe, they had to capture the Maltese Islands, a strategic position in the Mediterranean. At that time, Malta was the headquarters of the Knights Hospitaller, the most formidable Catholic warrior order. Suleiman the Magnificent decided to destroy them once and for all. On March 22, 1565, the Ottoman fleet, consisting of 29 ships and 40,000 soldiers, including 6,000 elite janissaries and 9,000 cavalry, departed from Istanbul. Command was held by Grand Vizier Mustafa Pasha and Admiral Piale Pasha. On the Maltese side, the defenders numbered only 8,700 men, led by Grand Master John Paraso de Valette, the 49th head of the Knights Hospitaller. Only 700 were real knights, the rest were mercenaries and militia. On May 18, 1565, the Ottoman fleet appeared off the coast of Malta. The Turks began with a fierce bombardment on Fort St. Elmo, the key stronghold of the island. For 36 days and nights, 30 cannons fired relentlessly. However, the defenders bravely held out under de Valette's orders. By June 16th, the Ottomans launched an all-out assault. 1,500 Maltese soldiers died. Only a few survived, but they took 8,000 Ottomans with them, including half the Janissaries and the famous commander Dragut, the Sword of Islam. After capturing St. Elmo, the Turks turned to Fort St. Michael and Fort St. Angelo. However, de Valette had set artillery traps at St. Angelo, killing 800 elite Ottoman troops. Furious, Mustafa ordered 65 cannons to surround and bombard both forts. It was estimated that over 100,000 cannonballs were fired, the longest bombardment in history at that time. On August 7th, the Ottomans launched another full-scale assault, breaching the walls and seeming close to victory, but were stopped by Malta's fierce resistance. Grand Master de Valette, though 70 years old, personally wielded his sword at the front lines, inspiring his men. At that moment, Knight Vincenzo Anastagi led a cavalry unit in a surprise raid on the Ottoman rear, killing over 60 soldiers. The Turks panicked, thinking Christian reinforcements had arrived, and hastily retreated. From then on, Ottoman morale plummeted. By September, disease and hunger had killed or forced one-third of their army to withdraw. On September 7, 1565, 8,900 European reinforcements landed and wiped out the remaining Ottoman forces from Malta. Of the 40,000 Ottoman troops, only 1/8 survived and returned home. The Battle of Malta became an eternal symbol of bravery. Had they failed, Europe might have knelt before Allah instead of praying to Christ. The Battle of Stalingrad, 1942 to 1943. Nearly 400 years later, another desperate last stand in distant Russia bore a similar fateful meaning. The Battle of Stalingrad. In the summer of 1942, after failing to capture Moscow, Hitler decided to shift his offensive to southern Russia to seize Stalingrad, an industrial and transportation hub on the banks of the Volga River. He aimed to control oil supplies and cut off Soviet supply lines. The campaign began with a devastating bombardment by the Luftwaffe, destroying 2/3 of the Soviet Air Force and turning the city into ashes. Despite being outmatched, the Red Army fought for every inch of ground. Stalin's slogan, "Not one step back," echoed across the front. Soviet soldiers fought hand to hand, grabbing the enemy by the belt, making the battle even bloodier and more chaotic. By late October 1942, the Germans had captured 90% of the city. However, the brutal winter and the Red Army's relentless resistance halted their advance. Hitler refused to retreat, even as the situation grew desperate. On November 19, 1942, Marshal Georgy Zhukov launched the Operation Uranus counteroffensive with 800,000 troops, forming two pincers to encircle Field Marshal Paulus's Sixth Army of 265,000 German soldiers. On December 12th, Field Marshal von Manstein attempted a relief operation, Winter Storm, but failed. After 3 months under siege, the German army ran out of supplies and starved in the freezing cold. On February 2, 1943, Paulus surrendered. Over 90,000 Germans were captured, but only about 5,000 survived to return home after the war. The Battle of Stalingrad was the turning point of World War II, marking the beginning of the Allied counteroffensive on all fronts. 3. The Battle of Luzon, 1945. On the Pacific Front in 1945, Japan demonstrated the same indomitable spirit in the Battle of Luzon, the largest island of the Philippines. The Philippines was of great strategic importance, where Japan stationed 135,000 troops and 227 aircraft. On January 9, 1945, the Allies launched their campaign to recapture the island. 70 warships bombarded heavily to pave the way for 175,000 American soldiers landing at Lingayen Gulf. Despite the bombardment, Japanese kamikaze pilots inflicted severe damage on the U.S. fleet, sinking several warships. On January 15th, a second American force landed southwest of Manila, encircling the city. The Japanese garrison held firm, destroying bridges and infrastructure, and fought to the last man. It took weeks and over 1,000 American soldiers to capture Manila. The surviving Japanese retreated to the mountains to wage guerrilla warfare. Some units continued fighting for years after Japan's official surrender. Would you like me to translate the conclusion section, Ket Lutn, as well to complete the entire text?